Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Microscope. Thank you so much for joining in. It is Thursday the 2nd of July. How is time flying? And we have had some absolutely fantastic questions coming in from you, as always, over the last week or so, relating to a number of different issues. And we're going to get cracking because some of them are absolutely brilliant. I want to get in as many as possible. We do first, before we start the questions though, have to tell you about Prize Week. Yes, it is indeed Prize Week. Hello everyone. Thank you. Hi, Catherine. How are you doing? Every month, we look at all the questions that we've managed to get through and answer in the Q&As over the previous month, and we pick the best one for a prize. And so I've been looking back over the questions we've managed to get through over the past couple of weeks, and I think this time there is a clear standout winner for me this time, and that is Chantel de Brion, who asked about, were the ancient Greek Olympic Games started with homing pigeons? Now, if you remember back to this sent me down a rabbit tunnel of trying to find out what this was about, because I had absolutely no idea myself, and eventually we discovered that there may well have been a case in the ancient world when someone used a homing pigeon and kind of sent it back home, stained a particular colour to announce his victory, but actually the homing pigeon myth really started in the modern Olympic Games and then has been phased out because a poor homing pigeon or two got burned alive in the Olympic flame when that was lit in the stadium, particularly back in Seoul. So Chantal, brilliant question. Thank you so much. Such a learning experience. So please do get in touch via email, microscopeacademic@gmail.com, or through the Facebook page to claim your prize. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much indeed for tuning in. It's great to have you here today. So Chantal, bravo, well done to you. Keep your questions coming in. Every month we do a prize. And some questions have been coming in this week, in particular in relation to the Ancient Invisible Cities series, which I did with the BBC, and which was reshown in the last 2 weeks, particularly the Cairo episode and the Athens episode. Christopher Beaton, who's aged 8, has got in touch. Now, Christopher, you tell me that you've been studying ancient Greece with your mum while we've all been off school, and your mum studied classics and was with me at university. Wow, okay, but you don't give me your mum's name. So kind of, I say hello to mum, who we studied classics together back at Cambridge as undergrads, and I say hello to Christopher, aged 8 as well. Thank you so much for getting in touch, and brilliant that you've been enjoying ancient Greece, and particularly the Ancient Invisible Cities, Ancient Athens episode, in which you liked the VR, great stuff, and you asked particularly about the silver mine that I had to squeeze into. What did it feel like being in there, and what was the favourite thing that I did in the Ancient Invisible Cities series? So Christopher, yeah, being in the ancient silver mines of Laurion in Attica was an absolutely eye-opening experience. I'd been into the entrance to some of those tunnels before, but had never been so far deep in as we went with the Ancient Invisible series crew, because obviously we were also laser scanning those tunnels, and I had absolutely no idea. First off, just the higgledy-piggledy nature of them. I kind of imagined mining tunnels, you sort of choose where you're going to go and you sort of go straight, but actually what they were doing was following the seam of silver wherever it moved within the rock, and as a result the tunnel goes almost vertically upwards, and then it goes almost vertically downwards, and then round and left and right and here and there, and there are certain kind of dead ends where they've obviously followed it, and then the seam is just actually that bit of the seam has petered out, so they've had to retrace their tracks and then go off in a different direction. And then what really surprised me was quite how narrow it got in certain points and times. And you're right, as you saw in the film, there were moments where it was so tight that I was having to squeeze my body through, pressed between the rock on both above and below me. And it was at that point when you really realise quite what a horrific experience it must have been, working, toiling, sweating like crazy down there. And I understood why in the ancient sources it's often referred to as the worst job that a slave would ever have to do was work in the silver mines of Attica. It really was the lowest of the low, the kind of thing you really, really wanted to avoid doing. And Christopher, talking about yourself as a child age 8, we know that there were both adult slaves and child slaves working in those mines, hacking away to get out the silver ore. So it was an incredibly claustrophobic, but at the same time, because I knew I was going to be able to get out of there at some point not too far into the future, and I wasn't down there committed to being down there labouring away. It was also a very exhilarating experience, and you do get an adrenaline rush from pushing yourself through these incredibly complex tunnels. And the other thing was I was very, very glad to have an expert there with me who knew the tunnels like the back of his hand, because the other thing is it's very easy to get lost. Completely get lost and not be able that easily to find your way out. Mum's name's Laura. Hello, Laura Canning. Hello, how are you? Lovely to see you. Thank you so much indeed for getting in touch. Hopefully Christopher will be able to pick up this answer to this question. So there we go, Laura, and you're passing on great, the love of classics to your son Christopher. Brilliant news. And yeah, so those tunnels were extraordinary. What was the other favourite thing I did in the Ancient Invisible City series? Probably being able to scuba dive, to go down and see some of the underwater stuff at Sunil. That was absolutely amazing. And of course descend down in Cairo to Saladin's well that went all the way down through the Acropolis in Cairo, down 90 metres or so back to the level of the Nile, going down there with the safety gear. That was quite something. Philip Towler has also been in touch. You're head of classics at Worth School, West Sussex. You've been watching the series with your pupils, who very kindly, thank you, bless you to all of you, have been nicknaming me as the Bear Grylls of archaeology. I can't survive that long in the outdoor wilderness to be Bear Grylls, but thank you so much for the kind analogy. What was the most hair-raising task you've undertaken? Did anything top the silver mines? Silver mines, yes, were claustrophobic and dangerous, but actually in terms of sheer danger, going down that well in Cairo, Saladin's well, because the steps that we were using really were just breaking away under our feet, and they were also covered with decades of crap, frankly, left by birds behind. So they were very slippy, very unstable. No one had been down into that lower section of the well for a decade because it had been off bounds because it was too dangerous. And we'd had a safety technician working in there for 48 hours before we turned up, trying to work out a way in which to make it safe. And the only way he could do so was for us he ran a safety line going down the middle of the well, so literally through the empty space in the middle of the well that the stairway then sort of went round in concentric circles descending down. We had a safety harness on. We were then attached via a cord to this central safety rope. But we then moved freely down the steps. If we had slipped off the steps and slipped into the abyss, we would have been held by this safety rope and we would have been left dangling 45 metres above this well. And then what the safety technicians would have to do would be to come down themselves, use an enormous sort of fishing hook to grab us and pull us back to the side where we could then get back on safe ground again. We couldn't have been hauled up, that was too difficult, there were grates above us, so we would have just been dangling above this well if we'd slipped and fallen, and doing all that with all the safety gear on, the helmets, the masks obviously as well, to stop the kind of the nasty stuff that was in the air down there getting to us. We could have been left dangling for quite some time. So thank you, Phil, for that. And Alex Cunliffe has been in touch. You've also been watching Ancient Invisible Cities. You've been asking about the scanning devices and whether they're used by the police at all. And you can imagine the use that these devices would have for the police. Yeah, this is absolutely a really interesting question and a really great one, because you're absolutely right, Alex. So the laser scanning that we use in millimeter precision to create a 3D coloured virtual, if you need it to be recreation of a particular landscape, is being used in some kind of recreation of some crime scenes, for instance. So instead of just doing it through photos, you can now offer through video within a courtroom a 3D virtual recreation of an exact crime scene to millimeter precision. But what's really interesting is that colleagues of mine in the Warwick manufacturing group and engineering departments at Warwick are not just using laser scanning, but they're also using X-ray machines, so a kind of inverse technology. Rather than trying to do big spaces, they're actually looking at very small things. And these techniques have been used also to look at ancient objects that are too fragile to unwrap or to open up. But if you put them into a specialist X-ray machine that can get at them in micro millimeter detail, you can then get a computer image that you can literally unravel in the computer and work out what's being said. And those machines are definitively being used by the police to uncover evidence, particularly in cases where, for instance, people have tried to burn evidence. And this happened a year or so ago, that the Warwick X-ray machine was actually used as a breakthrough piece for a police case in Warwickshire, where the evidence was too charred to the human eye to be able to actually use. But the X-ray machine was actually able to get into this object and scan, X-ray it in enough detail that then a computer, using all the digital finery of computers to bring out contrast, etc., could bring out what was actually kind of written and inscribed on this object, which turned out to be a key piece of evidence in the court case. So absolutely, Alex, you're quite right. These technologies have implications and uses both for ancient discoveries and for very, very modern discoveries relating to kind of police investigations. So some brilliant questions coming out of the Ancient Invisible Cities series. While it's on my mind, they have just announced that the Cicely series will be reshown coming up soon. It's going to happen on the 4th of July, so this Saturday, 4th of July at 10:40 p.m. on BBC 4. So a little bit late potentially for us younger ones, but definitely one to record. So if you haven't seen that, it's episode 1 of my history of Sicily that takes you from earliest history of Sicily through to the Arab invasion, and then episode 2 I suspect will come up a week or so later, which takes you from the Arab invasion through to the present day. Hello Shavini from Melbourne, hello Nikos, thank you everyone so much indeed for tuning in. So some brilliant questions there, thank you very much. We've also had a great series of questions this week reflecting on the things that we've all been aware of in the news over the past couple of weeks, thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement. And we have been responding to this kind of within Classics, and Classics really, many classicists have felt a very heavy responsibility to respond to this because of the ways traditionally that the study of the Greek and Roman worlds has been approached in the past and has been used to not just supplement and support the sort of very vague and frankly kind of meaningless notion in many ways of Western civilization, Western superiority, and a particularly white version of Western superiority and Western civilization. But equally, how the study of Greece and Rome has been part of national curriculums dating back to the era of kind of British colonization and empire, and was used to substantiate and support notions indeed of empire. I mean, one of the things I find extraordinary, for instance, is that the British conquest of India, turning it into part of the British Empire, was in part, small part, but in part substantiated by the fact that when you looked into the ancient history of India, it didn't have an ancient writer like Herodotus, our Greek historian of the 5th century BCE, and thus didn't have a proper historical record. Therefore, it was obvious that India needed a culture coming to take control that had itself antecedents and relationships back to these great Greek historical writers, so that it could bring history writing, proper history writing, to India, and other such ridiculous ideas like this. Hello, Toby from Brazil. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. We really are going global today. It's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant to see. And so Classics has been asked to think about how it has taught the ancient histories of Greece and Rome, and we've been thinking about that in relation to kind of what did the ancient world look like. And this was Sarah Scotty's question, who's been reading David Olusoga's great book about Black and British, talking about Black and mixed race Romans who lived in Britain during the Romano-British period. And can you tell us more about this? Absolutely. I mean, this blew up as quite a big Twitter scandal a year or so ago, when people were reacting very strongly to a cartoon image that had been drawn of Roman Britain, which had in it a black Roman. But yes, absolutely, we have to, and it's pretty much accepted within scholarship, that because the Romans drew their legionary forces from all around the Roman Empire, which included obviously Northern Africa and into the Middle East, and often, indeed intentionally, put legions stationed in places where they would not have natural affinities to the local people, they'd be more loyal to Rome, that you would end up with soldiers serving in Britain of very much mixed-race background, and indeed of kind of different black and a whole range of different ethnic backgrounds. And we hear, for instance, equally of Palmyrenes, people from Palmyra in modern-day Syria, obviously, actually working, not just as soldiers in Britain, but working in Britain near Hadrian's Wall in Roman Britain time, selling silk that was coming all the way from the eastern from China, coming, selling silk to the army to be used for military banners, etc. So really a very, very diverse picture that we need to be talking more about in the ancient world. And equally, we need to be broadcasting this new picture of the ancient world much more strongly outwards, so that classics and the study of the ancient Greek and Roman Mediterranean worlds, but equally more widely the ancient global history, can be used as now a force for both pushing back against those wrong perceptions of Western superiority, Western civilization, but equally pushing back and offering a picture of ancient world connectivity between cultures as opposed to isolation. And we're doing that again at Warwick in two ways, partly through the modules we teach undergraduates. So I teach the ancient global history module, a colleague teaches Africa and the makings of classical literature module, but we're also now doing it through the Warwick Classics network, which is our outreach arm, and we're collecting particularly Black Lives Matter and BAME resources that speak to these issues that can be used by pupils and teachers in schools. So do go and have a look at that at warwick.ac.uk/WCN. And we're also building up into our own research portfolio a much more kind of focused look at race and racism and its relationship with the classics as well. So these are really important questions. And that's coming in from both Sarah Scotty and Rebecca Louise, who was asking about how we're responding to that. So thank you so much indeed. That's absolutely brilliant. And as Gabrielle Murray is pointing out, it comes down often to issues such as the fact that there's marble statues surviving from antiquity are white marble, but actually, and that has been taken as some kind of sign and sense of kind of the particular race superiorities. But of course, that relies on the fact that these statues were white marble, which they weren't, we know, in antiquity. They were coloured in all sorts of colours. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much for those. And related to that, Donald Skinner-Reid asked, is there a book that you would recommend on the domestic life of the ancient Greeks? So getting into that nitty-gritty of daily life. What was it really like, following on from the sorts of conversations we've just been having? Yes, Donald, I can. It's actually quite an old book, but it's absolutely brilliant, by Robert Garland. And it's simply called The Daily Life of the Ancient Greeks. And you can actually read there, it's done by sort of topic, so you can sort of pick up what kind of topic you're interested in for what kind of aspect of the daily lives of the ancient Greeks you want to know more about. So Robert Garland's absolutely brilliant, definitely worth having a look at that. And one final question before we take a break. They really were coming in thick and fast this week. Absolutely brilliant. Helen Harguest has been enjoying the readings of ancient Greek drama that we've been doing. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Helen. I hope you have all been enjoying. Just a reminder that over on the YouTube channel, so the Professor Michael Scott YouTube channel, there are now a whole host of readings from me, both those ones that we did live a couple of weeks ago through YouTube Live, and a couple more that I've put up last week. And then finally, we added my version of Creusa from Euripides' Ion that I did as part of the Actors of Dionysus Daily Dose 100 celebration, the mini Dionysia festival we did on Twitter last Friday. So kind of do go and have a look at those on the YouTube channel. And Helen asks, given there are a number of translations out there, how do you decide which translation to use? Now, this is a really interesting question because it can often come down to very personal choice, I think. And translations and the balance in translation work is between being very, very faithful to the particular language and grammar of the original. Do you try to preserve that? Or do you move away from a kind of, as it were, a literal faithfulness towards a much more meaning faithfulness translation? So you're taking the implicit meaning of the text and you're then changing the words, and most particularly the word order and the words that are being used and the expressions, and you're updating that to near enough 20th, 21st century language to be able to hit the notes of the meaning of the text as precisely as possible, if not being as linguistically faithful. And trying to balance those two is very, very, very difficult job. And so sometimes people prefer, depending on what they're wanting to use the translation for, some people prefer something which is more linguistically faithful, sometimes people prefer something which is more faithful to the meaning. Normally for these kinds of readings that I've been doing, I prefer something which is more faithful to the meaning. And then we also have to think about how particular translations put emphasis on the sort of implicit assumptions we've been making in translation, perhaps without even knowing it. Thinking here particularly of Emily Wilson's recent translation of Homer's Odyssey, one of the first females to translate the Odyssey, and how she has uncovered all of these implicit male biases towards particular translations of particular words, such as Odysseus being always described in the Greek as polytropon, which has so often been translated as something kind of positive, cunning, wily, all of these things, all by male translators, where actually in the Greek the word has quite a few negative associations as well, and which kind of I think Emily Wilson translates simply as difficult, kind of this difficult man. And other such kind of implicit assumptions in other word translations as well. So some really interesting ideas that are floating behind a translation, and it's always worth having a good think about when you pick up a translation as to where it's sitting on that spectrum between linguistic and meaning faithfulness. We'll come back to one more question that's come in from Annabelle Matchin in a second, but a quick break to say what's going on in the news. Fishbourne Palace is under threat of permanent closure and is urgently fundraising to save the historic building. Part of the fact that as a result of the closures during COVID-19, no income coming in, no tourists coming in to see the site. This is a site that's had to be taking up money to be maintained during this time. Obviously, there's less government funds around, so this is something that we're really going to need to look out for across the board in heritage and cultural sites going forward that are really, really feeling the squeeze right now. So do, if you can. I know it's a very difficult time for everyone right now, but if you can, do support places like Fishbourne Roman Palace. Then we've also seen, again, in Egypt, amazing discoveries just coming out, this time down in Luxor, looking at the Sphinx-lined avenue that connects Luxor to Karnak's Great Temple of Ammon, and there's been huge new structures found, ovens, mud brick ovens dating to the late Roman Empire of the 3rd to the 5th centuries CE. So in this period, they were using these extraordinarily ornate, monumental, ancient pharaonic structures and putting kind of working kilns in amongst them as they were in the late Roman world, just churning away, doing their daily life. Amazing how different cultures relate to their own pasts. Thinking about things that are coming up, we talked about the fact that Cicely is going to be repeated this Saturday. This is Greece, the series I did originally for SBS Australia, is being repeated on PBS America UK, which is Freeview 91, Freesat 155, Virgin 273 or Sky Channel 174, and it's also on Amazon, and that's going out this week. So it started yesterday on the 1st. Today, tomorrow and Sunday, you've got up to all 5 episodes that take you on a big tour through the whole of Greece. Episodes 1, 2 and 3 are also being repeated on Sunday immediately prior to episodes 4 and 5. So you can have a massive binge watch of all 5 episodes if you so desire of This is Greece on Sunday the 5th, starting in the mid-morning. Next week, if you are thinking about doing classics at university, do come and join us at our Warwick Classics virtual open day. I'll be there on Monday the 6th of July in the session, which is running from 4 o'clock through to about 6:45 p.m. And if you go to our departmental website, warwick.ac.uk/classics, you can be directed to how to register for the open day for that. So I hope to see you there. Coming from Italy, coming from Rome, you've got Ancient Rome Live. That's a whole series of seminars and Q&A sessions and webinars being hosted by Darius Aria, who I know and worked with when we were doing the Ancient Invisible City series, as he presented the American-US version of that program. Also on British TV, started on Wednesday night, so hopefully you caught this, Dan Jones' new series of Walking Roman Britain's Roads. So do catch up with that on 5 Select. And equally the BSA lecture that I did as a live webinar last week. Now I understand that there was actually quite a major Zoom malfunction with this lecture, and it didn't let in quite a few hundred of the people who had registered registered for the lecture. So if you were one of those people who were registered but weren't able to access it, or were one of those people who weren't able to register because we had to close the registrations early because it was full, you can now see a complete version of that lecture, including the absolutely epic 50-minute long question and answer session after the 40-minute lecture. It's been a long time since I've done a lecture where the question session went on for longer than the lecture itself. Absolutely brilliant, absolutely loved it. You can see all of that online via the BSA website, or indeed through my YouTube channel, Prof. Microscope. So that was absolutely brilliant. And the Jove Theatre Company, who I did the Centre for Hellenic Studies reading and performance of Euripides' Ion with, that again you can see through the YouTube channel, they also have produced a new socially distanced modern adaptation of Euripides' Medea, which is got commentary by a whole host of brilliant classicists as well. That's on YouTube to have a look at. And then this I think is particularly interesting, Iconem. Iconem are a French company who specialise in doing 3D and virtual reality reconstructions of archaeological sites, and particularly working in war zones, working with archaeological sites that are under threat of destruction. And there's a great new site that's been put together by Iconem, where they've got now the largest World Heritage sites around the world, including places like Leptis Magna, but equally the Baths of Hadrian, the Severan Forum, Severan Arch, etc., that are available for you to explore in 3D. So all of these links are on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Prof. Michael Scott. Go and have a look at those. Absolutely brilliant indeed. Some great stuff. So we've got time for one or two more questions, I think, before our time runs out today. Thank you all for your great comments as well. Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. Christina, lovely to see you. Annabelle Mashin asked about, how did the leaders of the ancient Greek city-states respond when faced with viral outbreaks similar to the current COVID-19 pandemic? If they consulted the oracle, what cryptic advice do you think she would give to overcome the viral threat? And Annabelle, you are an NHS doctor seeking divine advice. Well, first off, Annabelle, can we say, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us, thank you for your incredible work during the period of the pandemic, and no doubt incredible work that will need to continue for some time to come as we slowly make it safe for us all. So thank you for your incredible work. What did the ancient Greeks do? Well, they were faced with pandemics, not quite of such a global nature, or at least they didn't perceive them to have been such global pandemics. But for example, most famously in 5th century BC Athens, during the Peloponnesian War, there was a great outbreak of plague in the city of Athens, after the Athenian authorities, and particularly Pericles, its leader, had decided that their policy, their strategy in this war would be to withdraw from the countryside, bring the whole Athenian community that had been spread out across the countryside inside the city walls of the actual central city of Athens, and protect themselves within those walls, leaving the countryside to be ravaged as much as their enemies liked. Bringing that many people into such close contact within the city walls meant the outbreak of plague very soon after, in which both Pericles' sons and indeed later Pericles' own life would be claimed by this plague. And we hear very detailed descriptions of it by the writer Thucydides, who talks about the terrible effects of it. And yes, indeed, they are almost immediately looking to the gods. It's no accident that in the 420s BCE, directly after the plague hit, that is when the Athenians call on and invite into Athens for the first time ever the healing god Asclepius. And of course, we think about Asclepius today, we think about the oath, kind of linking into the medical practice that went on under the auspices of Asclepius, and equally to early doctors, so the Hippocratic Oath, for instance, which, Annabelle, I presume you swore at some point during your medical training. Asclepius was invited for the first time into Athens in the 420s and given a permanent religious sanctuary there in a very prestigious spot. So actually around the base of the Acropolis. So you've got the Parthenon up on the top, and then around the base of the Acropolis with a whole series of mini sanctuaries that was within a very special religiously sacred area that was known in ancient Greek as the Pelargikon. And people were not allowed to live within this sacred area. It was just for the gods. And it was there that Asclepius was given a home and a small temple, and and people started coming to Asclepius on a very regular basis, asking for the help of the healing god when they were ill. And we then see surviving in the sanctuary after that huge numbers of objects that were dedicated to thank the god for his healing. And they were often objects in the shape of the particular body part that had been healed in whatever material the people could afford. So golden eyes, for instance, have been found there within the sanctuary, as well as all other sorts of limbs and different body parts. So, Annabelle, thank you so much indeed. If we can give you any divine advice, I don't think we can give you divine advice, but what we would like to say is thank you, and most importantly, please keep up the amazing work. It's absolutely brilliant, and if we can help in any way with a bit more inspiration from the ancient world, we would love to. We are out of time, everyone. I'm so sorry we aren't able to get through to some more questions, but there were lots more of you kind of waiting there with your questions. I'll give you a flavour of something I want to get to next time. Jonathan Hargreaves, who is your ancient hero and why? And do you sometimes struggle to accept their flaws or question your loyalty to that ancient hero? Jonathan, great question, and I'm going to throw that out to all of you. So please, over the next week or two, respond over the Facebook page. We'll set up a post about this. Who is your ancient hero and why? And do you sometimes struggle to accept their flaws or question your loyalty to them? I'll get thinking about my answer. Please, I hope you guys will as well. In the meantime, we will be back next time in just over 2 weeks. It's going to be a slightly longer period of time. Monday, and we're going for a Monday this time. Monday, the 20th of July at 4 p.m. is the next time that we will be joining together. In the meantime, don't forget, there is the Facebook page, facebook.com/Prof Michael Scott. There is also the Facebook Prof Michael Scott Classics community page, which many of you have been joining, sharing your photos, your travels, and having your own discussions on. Please do join that page as well. You can see a link through to do so from our Facebook page, so you can join the community group page, which is really you guys running the discussions. Please do check out those videos on my YouTube channel as well, Prof Michael Scott, and do have a look at all the great resources that we're pulling together for the teaching of classics at school level for all ages, Key Stage 2, 3, 4, right the way through to A level. So please have a look at those on the Warwick Classics Network website, which is warwick.ac.uk/WCN. I hope to see some of you at our open days next week on the 6th, and then there'll be another one on the 14th of July. Take care of yourselves in the meantime. Take care of one another. Stay safe, stay well. All the best.